I'm Jeff, and I have our definition of today, boys.
Hey,
Imposter. Imposter syndrome is the persistent internal experience of self doubt, perceived fraudulence, and despite external evidence of success or competency, and unlike ordinary self doubt, it lacks a very clear boundary. So, blurring the line between healthy humility and a distorted belief that what you've received or accomplished is completely undeserved.
choice.
Thanks. Thanks, Jeff. If you love what we're doing, if this is your first episode or your sixth episode, we are so freaking glad you are here. And uh, yes, so glad. And if it is your first time, seriously, thank you for stopping by to check it out. Listen, follow us, click us on social. John's doing a great job with the socials. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all the places where you are, we are as well. So go check out Imposters and come along for the ride. Thank you for being here.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, guys. And today's a topic day, so we're going to talk a little bit. We had our first guest on the last episode, so today we're going to cover a topic, and that topic was actually in the definition of the day, and it was that lack of a clear boundary, that fuzzy line that I think anyone who talks about imposter syndrome eventually has to struggle with. What is it? What does it mean? What is it? What is it not? Is probably one of the things we're going to cover a good amount. So today's topic is that fuzzy line between what is and what is not imposter syndrome. So let's dig in. So I'm going to start us off just by saying thank you so much to our last guest. We had Chris Kelso in, keynote speaker, author of Overcoming the Imposter, his recent TED Talk. It really is gaining steam, and Chris is one of the forefront speakers and just voices talking about imposter. And we talked about some things, and I don't know about you guys, but I was really, really blown away by what
It
he
was
said.
it was so rich, and it was like a buffet of just awesome content.
Yeah.
And he had spent so much time boiling things down into just such consumable things. I was enamored. It was so great.
The I just today, just this morning, I was talking to somebody and I actually brought up the self-esteem versus self-efficacy. And if you heard it on the last show, it bears repeating. Self-esteem is a feeling and feelings are fickle. I love the way he said that. And self-efficacy is just, can I do it or can't I? And have I done it before? And if I know that I can do it and I haven't done it before, okay, I'll go figure out how to do it. But I know that I can do it, even if I don't know how to do it right now. I know that I can figure it out. And that self-efficacy, when you look at it that way, that is such a great line between, and it is a useful line where self-esteem is a feeling, and if you're lacking in self-esteem, you can actually still have an understanding of that self-efficacy. Another thing that I loved the conversation around was I think our mutual disdain for the concept of fake it till you make it. Jeff, I know you chimed in a little bit. Kyle, you had some thoughts on it, but man, it's so fraught with issues and problems, and um, just not a fan of fake it till you make it. I don't know about you guys, but that ain't for me.
Um, um, and we were talking about this a second ago. So sort of on that blurry line side was, I think maybe even in some of the most effective leaders, what can come out is if there is a bit of imposter syndrome there, maybe that does start to shine through. Maybe that does become uh, a sense of vulnerability that people identify with. That, oh, they don't have it all figured out, but they're getting through that because they have so much confidence in their efficacy. This isn't bravado. They're not faking it till they make it. They have a genuine capability here, and they know how to bring people in to get things done.
Mm, yeah,
But
that's for sure. And he mentioned something that was so clear and so obvious, and it's not a good idea for someone suffering from imposter syndrome to consider the word fake, to call you to say that the actions that you're doing are being a fake like that. It's right there in the thesaurus that puts fake and imposter right next to each other. And I'd never really thought about it that way. So that was really eye opening. And then anyone that hasn't, go and find his TED Talk, Chris Kelso, 2Ks, and he talks about humble confidence, and it is it's such a great way of looking at how you can move forward with. You may have some, you may have some insecurities, but really finding that self-efficacy, and then approaching it from when you get to that point, being, instead of being insecure and arrogant, humble confidence is something that you can put into practice and play as you're working on these things. So thanks, Chris. We were so happy to have you on. So, we're going to talk a little bit more about that blurry line. And it's come up on the podcast a couple times that, we don't even know what to call this thing. A lot of psychologists, they hate the word syndrome. And it's largely accepted, and I'm not a psychologist, nobody on the show is, so we're going to use some of the terms and maybe hold ourselves to a lower standard. But when we bring on some folks, which are coming up soon, they're probably going to correct us, and they're going to say, the original was imposter phenomenon, let's use that term. It is not technically a syndrome, but what is it? What are some things? And I want to hear you guys kind of talk a little bit about some of the what it is and what it is not. Kyle, if you've got some thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I think when they're going back to the self-efficacy thing, like there are moments in life where you need self-reflection, and sometimes that's a hard conversation you have with yourself, or it's a hard conversation you have with other people, whether that's a manager or a spouse. You're going to have conversations in your life where self-reflection might lead to a feeling like imposter. I'll keep saying syndrome just for the sake of this.
Yeah.
But sometimes, I mean, obviously you can be overly self-critical, but there is room for like being self-critical in a healthy way, and recognizing where you need to improve, being coachable, being flexible, being humble. That's a lot different than imposter syndrome, but it can be really hard. And I think it can slide into feeling imposter syndrome too, because it can start with maybe you got a piece of feedback at work, or you got a piece of feedback from your spouse or your kid that you said something that hurt them, or you could have done something better. And it starts with, maybe you're like, why did I say it that way? Or how could I have said it better? Then you slides back into like, well, it's because I'm not supposed to be doing this. Or, it's just a couple of tweaks and a couple of mental lapses from the imposter syndrome. So I think that's why it's really hard to differentiate, but there is room for healthy self-critique and improvement and things like that.
Yeah,
totally. And I think sometimes what helps get on one side or the other is most people with imposter syndrome are high achievers. So the difference between self-doubt, the self-doubter may never even move forward, and because that might be so consuming. But when part of what I think about is the word like persistence in the terms of that feeling. And two words pop out: persistence and evidence. You persistently have this feeling despite physical evidence of an achievement, an accomplishment. That persistent thing. Self-doubt comes and goes. That's probably on a spectrum. That's probably up, it's down. It's not this, I'm carrying this core thing, this core fundamental belief that I do not deserve what I'm getting based on my clear evidence of accomplishment and acumen.
Adam Grant, there's a TED Talk that Adam Grant does, and he talks a little bit about, and I think he splashes a graphic up during the talk, and it shows this sort of timeline of emotional response. And it's, I'm good, I'm shit, I'm okay, but I'm feeling vulnerable, I'm shit again. And he said, and I think this points to some of the evidence-based stuff. He said, let's twist that a little bit and just look at it from a different perspective. You can say that performance was shit. I'm not shit, but that performance the performance was shit. And being able to kind of pull apart the feelings from the feelings and the emotion, and I think it does go back to self-esteem versus self-efficacy. Whether the outcome was good or not, I can still walk away a decent human being, but oftentimes that is not what we feel internally. And I think just that awareness and that being intentional about looking at it and being able to say, like, that was a shit performance, that doesn't mean I'm shit. And that's so important. Guys, I think we talk a little bit about what is the difference between general self-doubt and imposter syndrome, that line of, where does that come into play? And I think one of the more fascinating components is when it's situational. And where is, let's talk a little bit about that fine line between, no, this is just good judgment, I'm out over my skis, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'll get through it, versus situational, true imposter syndrome. Examples from your life, or just kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, anytime you take a new role, or especially if you're someone that's trying to advance, or like me, I like to try to do different things. If you look at my resume, each role looks really different. And a lot of that is because curiosity is really one of the most important things for me. Like, continually stoking my curiosity is like a motivator for me. I don't know if other people like that, but remaining curious and learning new things. And once I stop learning new things, then I want to change jobs, because you probably think I'm a job hopper, but really I'm just like, I'm out, like, you're no longer entertaining my curiosity, so I got to go fulfill that somewhere else. But it lands me in a lot of roles, like, where I'm really good at interviewing and getting the role, but then I get in it and I'm like, dang, it's like, there's a lot about this I don't know. And like, being honest with your team, especially if you're leading a team, or your team is depending on you for something, it's really important to be honest about, like, I haven't done this, and there's nothing. I think there's a scary feeling of doing that, especially in a work setting where you get paid to do a thing and you don't know how to do some of the things. And, depending on where you work, there could be a lot of critical, there could be a lot of criticism toward that, but there's also a lot of healthy workplaces, like, where they recognize, like, we didn't hire you because you were a perfect person. So if you are comfortable with it, communicating, I haven't done this before, I doubt I can do this on my own, I need help, or I need to learn, or I need to be trained. That's a lot different than, I'm not supposed to be here, I'll never be able to figure this out because I am a fake. And so I wish that workplaces were better, or maybe not just workplaces, but people in relationships, whatever the situation is, were a little more aware of the difference, because it's led to a lot of, I think, bad behaviors in a lot of places. People end up, faking it, faking doing things, and stuff gets broken, and the damage is multiplied, and it's more long-term and affects more people. And if someone would just raise their hand and said, I'm new here, never done that thing, it wasn't on the job description, so can we talk about it? I know I struggle with that. I don't want to be the guy that says I don't know how to do something, so.
Well, you hit
But
the nail
anyway,
on
it
the
is a
head.
very thin line.
One of the nails you hit on the head there, though, was were they rewarding bad behavior, the wrong behavior, because I think there is so much value in. I think one of the best opportunities I ever got was because my answer probably was, I don't know, but let's figure it out. And so what I got good at, and what leadership started to trust, was we'll either get to a no or a yes really quickly because of curiosity, the curiosity there in this person. And it was an interesting part of doing projects, and that's why I love project management, Kyle. Same reasons. It was moving from one shiny initiative to the next. Like, it's the next thing we're figuring out. Let's put this puzzle together and move it on. Let's connect the dots. But inside of that, I think there's a lot of value in an organization figuring out, should we be doing this? And then where are my most curious puzzle people to organize themselves around this and maybe get us to no pretty quickly. It could be a no, but the fake it till you make it people, it never turns into no. Or I don't know. I don't think we're going to be able to, to nail this. And so, I think, and you were talking about some of my own experiences there. There was for a while there, I was like, I don't know if these are project failures or not. And one of my leaders was like, no, this is excellent. This is exactly what we need, is figuring out no really quickly or pragmatically, a real no. This is why we're not doing this. This is exactly what we're not going to do. Um, Versus they'll reward the yes people, or they'll reward the fake it till you make it people,
Yeah.
or they work it and work it and work it, and the project will not somehow, it doesn't start to gel, and they can't figure out why. And so, yeah, I think you touched on something really interesting there, Kyle.
Yeah, we talked a little bit, self-doubt, often situational. Imposter syndrome, much more chronic and much more pervasive. And I think imposter syndrome has a very poor relationship with evidence, with facts, because we talked about, early on, the looking backwards, the plaques on the wall, the accomplishment is made, yet I still can't experience it purely, or, the things we tell ourselves, it was somebody else, or I had a good team, or I was in the right place at the right time. And so, the relationship to evidence is so out of whack and out of kilter with imposter syndrome. Um, and then again, the timing, is it situational, or is it chronic or persuasive? Those are things that we can use. They're yardsticks. They're going to get you close. They're probably not going to be 100%. But I think one of the other things that we can really dig into here is the emotions component. And so when we're sort of looking for that line, we've got self-doubt on one side, we've got imposter syndrome on the other. What are the emotional ranges in between there? And I think that could be something that we could look to. And so, that emotional intensity, I think, is something that there's examples there that we can use as better yardsticks also.
Yeah. So first thought for me on that is, so when we're talking about emotion, to me, it's what's your physical response to that emotion. And I think early in imposter syndrome, how's that it's gonna manifest in overworking, looking for validation from the overworking because you don't believe, the evidence that's there. And and so to me, it's learning what your physical and relational response is going to be to how you're feeling. Knowing, am I seeking validation right now because the imposter needs it? Am I overworking right now so the imposter can relax? And I think, you mentioned Chris. I think Chris named his or something. I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah.
To where his emotions were going to get wrapped in a personification that had predictable behavioral responses into it, and he was going to learn how to tell it no or tell it yes or whatever. But that persistent personification I thought was really interesting too, to kind of tie back to Chris. But for me, on my personal journey, it was learning to choose new relational and actual paths in response to how I was feeling versus the natural reactions to the emotions.
I think when you start looking at nerves, performance anxiety, and I think we're going to get a great guest coming up in a couple of episodes from now, that's actually an expert on anxiety. And I'm looking forward to that conversation, but it's like, what is anxiety? Maybe that's another one that's like, well, there's a spectrum. There's, nerves that are logical, their hesitation, totally makes sense. And then there's like the absolute flop sweats that you get sometimes. when it's over into the red zone and full on. But, that spectrum in between, how do you, I'd wonder, Kyle, what are some of the ways where you've seen some of that anxiety kick in? And, the extremes are kind of easy to diagnose, but have you ever had a situation where it's kind of more in the middle and you just don't know how to fix it or address it because you don't know what it is, that blurry line?
Yeah. I think I find, and it kind of goes back to two things. One's like triggers that we all have. We all have like triggers that
Mm,
situationally tend to bring more, like maybe a situation that bothers you or Jeff would maybe be fine for me and vice versa. And then like
Mm.
background, right? Like upbringing, like you bring a lot into the situations too. I find that, this is an interesting topic because I know for me, like I get anxiety from a lot of things. So it's really hard. I just have anxiety problems that I've had to work through most of my life. And whether that's from imposter syndrome or from self doubt or from whatever it is, it's really hard to determine because I'm pretty much a flight or fight kind of person, and I get my heart palpitates really quickly and I get the sweats, like you said earlier. And that happens a lot for me. I get flustered, you know what I mean? And, um, but I think stepping back and recognizing the situations, like you start to put together, like sew together the pieces of these are the things that I find that commonly induce that in me. And for me, it's like when like other people obviously don't know what they're doing, but they're telling you what to do. That's one thing that's a huge trigger for me. Like how you can just tell someone's obviously just pretending to know, and like they're giving you a process and then you find out the process is broken and wrong. Like
They're faking
that's a
it till
trigger
they
for me.
make it.
Faking it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, some people, but like some of the people I know that I'm thinking of specifically are like they thrive in this.
Yeah.
Like this is
Mhm.
their confidence coming like their confidence comes from just being that person that just espouses random things. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, do this and that and that and this, and it's not documented. There's no processes anywhere. It's just this person,
Mhm.
just the only, the person that's been doing it 20 years, never wrote a thing down,
Mhm.
and is just saying things that fall out of their head. That stresses me out, man. And it's like I've recognized though that that's not really imposter syndrome. It just like it drives self doubt in me. It's like, well, this person doesn't really have the competency. How can I get the competency to do this? It's like, and so I've recognized that that's not necessarily me not belonging or pretending to be doing something I shouldn't be doing. That's just like I get real anxious when people are obviously mailing it in and not actually knowing what the hell they're talking about.
Mm,
Well, and part of the anxiety is probably driven because you've seen the net results of that continued kind of behavior.
Hmm.
Like it's a bad culture, things break, and then if
Yeah.
the oracle all of a sudden isn't available, all of a sudden I call them oracles. They turn themselves into oracles, or they're like a cardinal in a cathedral,
Hmm.
right? They know the rules. When you come in, cover your shoulders, speak when spoken to. Like you almost have to have ceremony to get knowledge out of them. And yeah, I'm with you because when I recognize those folks, I immediately am like, oh man, how's this one gonna manifest? We've got to start handling that. But yeah, I feel you there, Kyle. That's fine. Yep.
we talked a little bit about, and Jeff, I love the look at the physical component that comes along with the emotional side.
Hmm.
And I think it's poorly understood. I think there's a lot of studies being done. One of the more fascinating things that I've ever looked into is Alice Miller. I think we may have talked about her. She had a book out called The Body Never Lies. There's another very
Mm.
similar book written that was like 5 years later. Alice is the OG. She does not get enough credit for the work that she's done. But she was one of the first. She was kind of one of the frontier breakers and one of those first trendsetters around the idea of how we go about storing trauma. And trauma is a big word. Is imposter syndrome a component of trauma? Does trauma induce imposter syndrome? I think there's so much there to unpack, but I think the ability to look at that physical response it is a good indicator, Jeff. I think it's something that could be a way to see to make that line less blurry, because if you're anxious, if you have nerves, if you have hesitation, that's one thing. But that that completely that paralytic type anxiety is, if you look at it, you go, this, yeah, this really doesn't make sense. I mean, this my reaction is so far above the fact that
Hmm.
I've got to put together a PowerPoint presentation, and yet I'm over here, curled up in the fetal position in the corner. That is not a normal response. And so I think that's one way that we can look at it is, what are the physical components? The idea of come around the corner. If you've ever come around the corner and somebody scares you and you feel it down in the tips of your fingers, that that's an autonomous nervous system reaction. It exists for a reason. It's how, you don't get eaten by the bear when you come around the corner. But
Right.
one of the things Alice Miller talks about is the way that our brain interprets fear. It's at the core of fight or flight, and we can have a reaction that actually, at a subconscious level, we're responding to as though the bear's standing right in front of us, and it's really nothing more than a PowerPoint presentation. But we might
Right.
experience it like it's the bear. And I would highly Alex Miller, The Body Never Lies. She also wrote a book called The Drama of the Gifted Child, originally German, so I don't know what it is in German, but not an easy read, but one that anyone that has issues with trauma from their life, which I think is probably everyone, that they could benefit from this incredible read. But I think, the idea of the evidence, the idea of frequency and persistence, the idea of what are the emotions that are hitting you. These are all things that I think are good. They are good line, less blurry line makers. Um,
Well, for me, just to kind of chime in on that, what I've learned to recognize is what what are my reactions to imposter syndrome, right? And I can speak from my own personal experience. And for me, it's going to be overwork. I'm literally going to overwork till someone tells me to stop, or that's we're right where we need to be, right? And or will I seek external validation? I'll have to sense that I know I'm looking for validation on the results, and I have to shut that off because that's again giving I'm feeding that unhealthy thing. And so for me, it's those are probably two big ones. But I think all um, whether it's anxiety or imposter syndrome, anything was formed in a crucible where we learned how to survive. Especially if it's related to trauma. So our emotional reactions are, to your point, is it the bear, are about survival, and that's where our physical aspects came in to say. So let's put it in a professional sense. Why would you overwork? I'm ensuring my survival. Why would I seek validation? I need to know that I'm doing a good job because it ensures my survival, my family's survival, my business's survival, my brand's survival, all key off of me getting these cues to let my imposter know that everything's fine. And that to me is what it's really rooted in. And you almost have to like tell it, you have to talk to it. You're fine. You did an amazing job. No one has it all figured out. And by the way, what you just built isn't a runaway rocket that's going to land in a crowd, right? You're we're good, right? Don't attribute that much emotion to the delivery of what you did, especially in like our professional corporate worlds or whatever. Or I wasn't flying the helicopter that had the baby transplant organ on it or something and it crashed. I think we can then start learning to attribute a certain amount of emotion from our own storage to what the potential impacts are of a failure.
it's probably a good segue. Um, when we talk a little bit about some of those blurry lines, I think we're trained to be on the lookout for fears. And so let's say there's a fear of failure. Okay, logical. That makes sense. Probably a little easier to diagnose because it kind of flows with the normal behavior patterns. But the first time I heard this, someone asked a question about fear of success. And I kind of, okay, well, didn't know that was a thing because of sort of the training that we get from an early age that, you fear failure, but you don't fear success. Well, no, actually, almost everyone
Mm,
fears success in a certain kind of ways. And so, um, when you start going through that fear of success, now we're suddenly in really uncharted territory. And I've found that to be a lot harder to diagnose. So back to that blurry line piece, can you guys think through some examples of where, looking backwards, you think, I probably fear of success may have been my problem there. Kyle, you look like you've got something.
Yeah, I think the first word that, or the first thing that comes to mind with fear of success is self sabotage.
Mm,
I find that I was in a band when I moved here, and we actually like had a song on the radio. Like we were really close, like, but it was like death. Like it was a death. It was like a lot of work to get one. And the minute it came out, we were slashing each other's tires and tearing each other's esophaguses out. It was a scene, man. Ever read Helter Skelter? No. Um, but sorry, I read too much
you guys weren't
Manson
doing enough
material.
drugs or something. You
But
need to
it was
chill.
not enough. Not
Yeah.
enough. We need a 60s guru. Um, but yeah, I just remember, I'm not going to say who. I don't think they're ever going to, I don't know if they would ever come across this. But a certain someone like tasted that idea that success was on the way, and but the reverse reaction started happening, like lashing out, lack of trust, all of a sudden not trusting people. All of a sudden it was like we had been nothing. We were in the negative. We had lost money. We had CDs in someone's attic. We printed 2,000 CDs at the advent of Spotify, and we thought we were going to sell t-shirts. No one wanted our t-shirts. But we got this song out, and it was not on everywhere. It was in Nashville. It was in a few cities, but it was circulating a little bit. And you would think it would be like success and a breath of fresh air, but it really was the opposite. It was almost like like you guys aren't doing your jobs. You don't care about the band like I care about the band. Why do I have to do everything around here? And this person owes me this, and I'm not getting enough accolades. And it was just like, wow. And I don't know if you can call that fear of success, but at a subconscious level, success entered the realm. But let's be real, it was way out there, on the rings of Saturn. It was on the farthest out ring. It was it was the smallest taste, and all of a sudden you would have thought, it disturbed everything, man. So I wouldn't call that fear of success, but I would call it slight taste of success. And all of a sudden, like these behaviors. So I think self-sabotage in that way in my life has been correlated. I've seen it where it correlates with that fear of success or whatever you want to call it.
mm,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good way of putting it. And for me, what I've seen, even in others that have struggled with it, or I've even kind of had that moment where it's like, oh man, they said yes. Now it's time for real results, right? We're going to be in this upper echelon presenting this idea, and me and my big mouth, uh-oh, right? And now I think there's an element to that, which it's you're not playing around anymore, and you're not pontificating about wouldn't it be great if we just built it like this or did it like that or wrote this song or this, that, and the other. And all of a sudden it's like, great, the world bit on what what you're trying to get done. And then there's that moment where you have an out. You're out. I think, Kyle, what you were saying, it's sort of self-sabotage. Like, I'm going to blow this up so that I don't have to actually go through this potential. Like, success means visibility. And if you don't want to feel
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable, visibility is the devil. A lot of times when I'm working with different teams, even we start modifying process and we're making things highly visible, all of a sudden there's this real dip in confidence over what we just did because of the amount of visibility it brings, the amount of data. There's line item level visibility, there's trends, there's analysis, there's all this stuff. So that's on a technical sense. But to me, that fear of success is or the self-sabotage moment is because that's your out, is to find something wrong, to not have to walk through the thorns, or what is it, the first guy through the wall gets a little bit bloody. There's that moment where you don't have to go through it. And to me, success is you're breaking through a wall, whether it's a personal one or you've gotten someone to bite an idea that you're going through that wall on your own. So, or not maybe on your own, but you're going through that wall um, based on something that you got others to believe in. And that's where I think the high achiever versus self-doubt takes over. The high achiever is going to move through, learn how to carry the imposter syndrome with them, versus self-doubt may steer them completely back the other way and be like, oh, not really. I don't really want that much visibility. And I think that's what people are really saying when they're saying they're scared of success. They're scared of visibility, scrutiny. Because there's going to be camps on you when you become highly visible or somewhat successful, right? People are going to be like, even great musicians. I love your band example. These are like world-renowned bands that I don't like, right? Like, oh, you must. It's not like it's so, because even in the business world, I think our success, to your point, Kyle, of certain leaders and their style, it's subjective to whether they're great on it, know their stuff, right? There's people, it depends on what they value. There might be leadership that values the oracles being around the office. That's what they love. That's what they want. And the rest of us are like, that's horrible. That's terrifying. No. So I think, I think fear of success is ultimately about a fear of visibility and scrutiny.
Yeah, and that subconscious call out also, I think it what Kyle said was woven through so much of what you were talking about, Jeff, that like that underlying thing that that we tell ourselves at a subconscious level, it you feel unsafe. And it's like that unsafety kicks in. And in a lot of ways, I think that's where like a reframe that might be able to help is, self-doubt is a signal. Um, and
Mhm.
imposter syndrome is a story. And the rich tapestry of the subconscious, it's all symbols and stories. Um, it's also rich. And I think that's probably one of the harder things is that the stuff that happens on a subconscious level, they call it subconscious. You're not aware of it. And it takes a lot of reflection to be able to analyze it, to understand it, and then even to begin to draw the line of, well, was that just generalized self-doubt? Was that full-on imposter syndrome? It's like you can't even get to the question because so much of where this is happening is some, deep rich tapestry of storytelling that's happening inside of your brain, and you can't even get to the markers of, well, is it or ain't it, because you're really more caught in some of those subconscious trappings that by the very definition you're not conscious of, you're not aware of, that you have to spend a lot of time to unpack, that most people just don't.
Yeah.
um,
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, which was, how do you unpack your subconscious, or how do you get to that? And I think one of the ways is to go, okay, well, what was my plotted response to that emotional input or that criteria? Like what, and is it journaling? And I'm spitballing. Like, do you journal? I reacted like this, right? I had these feelings. I had this kind of come up, or I was frustrated, or I was anxious, whatever. And then I think that's where you start quantifying things for who can help you. Is it a mentor? Is it a psychologist?
mm,
Or be like, these are my responses to the following criteria. And then I think someone can help dial that in, right? If they start saying these certain things. So let's say if we're talking back to the blurry line, I got this, and then I react like this, and I'm being honest, and these are my responses. Somebody could literally go, well, that's normal self-doubt. That's normal, being green or inexperienced, whatever, versus, whoa, this could be full on, imposter phenomenon, imposter syndrome, if you're having the following reactions to those criteria.
Yeah.
But that's where you could involve someone else by defining what your responses are. But that's the hard thing.
Well, we've talked about it some. I think journaling is not one we've really talked about, but great tool. Let's talk a little bit about some of the tools. You mentioned,
Mm.
um, journaling, self-driven, self-motivated, uh, something that is very, it's a lot of times it's that subconscious coming out onto the paper, and you're learning about things about yourself, but it's self-driven, it's self-motivated. I think the mentor piece, go talk to a mentor, go talk to your pastor, go talk to, your friend. Um, but where I think, I've said it before, I think there's two types of people that are in therapy and people that should be in therapy. And what's weird
Yeah.
is I have, for the first time in 20 something years, I've stopped therapy. Now, it's not a long-term thing. It felt really strange to go in, but I went into my therapist one day and I said, hey, I feel like right now we had all these amazing breakthroughs after some really dark times in my life. And in about 5 years, we made 10 years worth of progress. And I feel like a lot of what I'm doing right now is just coming in and giving you updates on stuff. And like, we're not doing the work. I'm just kind of, well, here's the good results that came from the work we did 5 years ago. What are we doing right now? And so it was really strange because I was like, I think I need to take a break. And he's like, I've been thinking about that as well. I agree with you. It's been remarkable what we've accomplished, and that accomplishment is sacred. But I kind of did hit that point where and what's scary is the idea of, well, now I've got to go let it break for a couple of years, and then we're going to get back in the chair, get back on the couch and unpack all this stuff. But I say all that. I do think, therapy is something that is really critical. And, again, I'm taking a pause, but I don't foresee a future where at some point I don't re-engage. And I know that I couldn't have made any of some of the breakthroughs that I've made, without that piece of it, without that. And not enough people do it. And so I feel like there's a question in here. I just don't know what it is, other than, what is your reaction? You don't have to share this, but like, you guys in therapy, you have a therapist?
Yeah.
Lots and lots.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
is it
Nailed
uncomfortable to
these.
talk about it? That's a fun question. I mean, we kind of
It's not
strayed.
for Gen Zers.
Yeah.
Gen Zers be posting. I see Gen Zers be posting their transcripts.
Everything's
They're,
pathologized. Yeah,
they're,
everything.
there's not a HIPAA violation in that generation. I literally, like, I see people, this is what my therapist said today, and like 5 Instagram stories with size 8 font later. It's like, just live stream it next time, so
Yeah,
we can
right.
see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I used to think it was uncomfortable to talk about.
To me, I think there's a stigma that comes generationally for sure. And then whether it's, if I were to go tell somebody, be like, yep, I hit, 45 and I had to go get my prostate checked. People are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Versus, you know, uh, once a month I go in and I give myself a head check. And so even Johnny, when you were going in and giving updates, I think that's still a form of it, because you still had to organize your thoughts
Yeah.
for a limited amount of time. But that's what therapy gave you, was the tools to quantify everything and compartmentalize and learn what you know and how you're responding and what's going well and what's not, and differentiate. So yeah, I've always found, yeah, I think therapy is a great tool uh, for learning how to do that or organize those things. You mentioned journaling a little bit, and then sometimes, for me, it was Kyle. You were mentioning curiosity earlier, and I'm such a studier of human behavior. I started kind of studying my own when I was like, do you remember that episode of Seinfeld where Costanza decided to do opposite day? He's like, I'm going to do the opposite of
Mm-hmm.
every instinctual response that I have. And I'm like, I actually did that
It's
at
top
one
5
point.
episode.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do something different than what my instincts are telling me to do right now. And then I'm going to kind of measure the outcome. So I think there's a form of curiosity. Then there's a form of physically making a decision that you're going to have a different response to that same criteria this time. And then measure the outcome. And it may sound a little, cognitively dissident, but it's real. Like to me, that's the work is sitting there going, that worked great. All right, now, and then to me, choosing to do those different things, for us, especially if it's instinctual, all your synapses are going the other way. You've got to literally build new bridges physically in your brain to that's the response, that's the reaction. It's and so what is it that you form new habits and then your habits become lifestyle. Where I think if you're not consciously modifying what those responses are that have been unhealthy um, in the past, then I think that's a great tool. Is just try something different and measure the outcome,
Mm.
and then if it's positive, right, then take a pragmatic approach to outcomes and feelings versus well, I'm just going to say nothing. I'm going to do nothing. That's my response. No, that's not good either. Try something different.
Mm. I'm thinking through, we're talking about tools that we can use to clarify that blurry line. And we've wandered in a couple different areas, and we've talked about probably ways that we can address the imposter syndrome versus understanding it. But step one is always understanding it, then to address it. But here's an interesting one: substances. And when I say substances, I'm gonna lump in those that are illicit, those you can find at the corner
Mm,
package store or convenience store, and then those that are prescribed. And there's such a complicated relationship there with, the types of things, even prescribed medication, that can end up doing nothing but dulling that that part of yourself that might at some point along the line be able to analyze and find that line and do all those things. um Substances are such a complicated topic, and I would say it's sort of strange. I've used all the wrong ones and self-medicated, and never was seeking any sort of clarity or any sort of line. I just wanted to dull the pain. I wanted to make it go away. I wanted to get out of my own head. I've found my way to something. This ain't for everybody. Full disclosure. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not recommending this to anybody. But personally, I was having I had neck surgery back in October. Before I had the neck surgery, this is probably a couple of years before I had the neck surgery, they prescribed gabapentin, Neurontin. And you go out and look on the web, and people have, good and bad responses. And a lot of it, from what I understand, is there's a receptor, and whether you have the receptor, or it's, whether this medication works for you or not. But I could tell you one thing that happened for me when I started taking this medication, which was for pain. It was a non-opioid pain reliever for some of the what they call radicular pain that was from neck issues. One really strange thing that I found along the way is it sort of tamped everything down to the point where I truly don't know, would I have been able to make that progress, that talk therapy component, that stuff that I did with the in both on the couch and off the couch and in life. And I'm not entirely sure that had I not, had Mama's Little Helper in the form of gabapentin, that I would have been able to find that blurry line and start actually doing some good work that was a solution. Um, I think the invitation there is, what about you guys? Has it been, from a substance component? Is it all negative? Have you found positives?
I found positives by reducing chemicals. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to sound really annoying to a lot of people right now, but like, John, you and I are both sober, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny. I was really reluctant to use the term sober because I would say that my drinking problem was not one of like quantity, but it started to become that. But it was more of like my reaction, like the reason why I drank, and like when I would do it, like I wasn't like I would social drink and I was fine, but my problem was like alone drinking, and it's um, and it's funny because I quit before and I quit for like 18 months. And when I started back, I was like, I'm going to be really responsible. And it's like, I'm going to have one old fashioned a week. And it's like, I'm going to have two old fashions a week. And it's like, I'm going to have two old fashions twice a week. And then it's like, I'm going to have two old fashions twice a week that are now not 2 ounces of whiskey each. They're 4 ounces. It's just like, and there's this weird correlation between increased stress and not being able to cope, and this is pre-therapy stuff too. Therapy helped a lot with this as well, and my dependence on that. And I found that the impacts on my thinking, my fitness overall, like has just improved dramatically. It does suck, like having just to deal with things and not numb yourself, but having to go to therapy or being really honest about where you're at. But that's been the benefit. Now, in terms of other substances like medications and stuff, I have achieved a lot of what I tried to. During COVID, I was on the only time I took SSRI blockers. I took the blue one, not the blue one. The blue one. But I, yeah. And I was starting to have the worst panic attacks I have ever had on it while I was on it. And I was like, this is what I'm trying to prevent. And so when I got off it, that feeling you get when you wake up from a bad dream and you feel like you're falling. And when I got off it, I was having that feeling every 5 seconds. It was so weird what it was doing to my body. And I swear to God, like almost a year after I got off that stuff, it was still messing with me, man. So that's not to say I'm anti that. I'm just saying that it didn't affect me the way I wanted it to. And it was doctor prescribed, but I really changed my diet. And I like carnivore isn't for everybody, but I had to, because I had such bad inflammation issues and I was on pills and I was on gels, and the doctors my pain was getting worse. And I finally realized like it's my diet. And so for me, it was taking foods out. So I literally for a year ate meat and dairy. That was it. I haven't had sugar in a year and a half. And I am only saying that because I can't. Like when I do, I can't get out of bed because I'm in so much pain. So all that to say, I don't know how we're linking it back to imposter syndrome, but you asked the question, like, if you're going to look at chemicals, look at what you're putting in your body every day and how you're treating your body every day. A lot of people casually drink, and I'm actually becoming anti-alcohol at this point. The science is coming in. I'm reading a lot of books about it right now, man. I read this book called Alcohol Lied to Me. There's all these really interesting, the generations behind the three of us are drinking less than we do. The sales of non-alcoholic beer are like doubling every year. People are coming around on it. And I went from thinking I'm just going to casually quit drinking to I don't mind saying that I'm sober, all the way to saying maybe I'm a little anti-alcohol. So we casually accept it. So going back to your question, like before you start looking at chemicals to add, look at what you're already putting in there and how is it affecting? Because I know like even like a week after I quit drinking, there was this new level of clarity that I had. John, I don't know if you had that, but man, the clarity was there like it hadn't been. That was a really long answer. Sorry.
No, I think you hit right on it, because we're talking about, what are the tools that we can use to find some of that clarity. And, we've gotten a lot broader around just the topic of clarity, but you need that clarity to be able to see the clarity of what is self-doubt, what is imposter syndrome. And we've talked about journaling, we've talked about therapy, we've talked about mentors and friends. But Kyle, I think you hit on some of the things that we so seldomly look at, and it's like, what kind of junk are you eating? Are you dosing yourself up with, liquor? And if you're French, maybe that's okay. But if you're not, let's look at that. And
Mhm.
maybe once we get to that point, then we start looking at, are you eating crap? And do you
Mhm.
exercise? And I
Sure.
know, I go through cycles and I am eating a lot better. My wife is started a more of a keto approach. I've tried to follow suit. I'm feeling things that I feel better because of it. I'm feeling better because I'm not eating Doritos at 2 o'clock in the morning. Who'd have thunk it, right?
Mhm.
Shocker. But then it comes into, one of the things that is of such utility is in combating these things and providing clarity is exercise. And that's a lesson. I know it's true when I say it out loud. I don't follow it like I should. I'll admit it, but it is a tool. And so, Kyle, I
Well,
think you were going down the right path with it.
Yeah.
well,
Dude, I live sick. Not, and I'm not saying this in a brag way, like, but I live 6 days a week now. Like, there is just like this system in place now that I like, and now I'm almost like indulging in what you just described, like, because I feel that clarity and the mental. Not that it's perfect all the time, but like it's like I discovered a new side of myself that I feel like alcohol and sugar and processed foods and seed oils, like it was all hiding, that part of me. And now that I see it, it's like I don't want to unsee it. Like I can see that productive self, that clarity, and it's addictive. You know.
yeah. Well, two things popped up for me when you mentioned that. When you started talking about chemicals, I was thinking, well, yeah, our chemistry physically as a human is super important to how we feel, how we're going to respond, how we're going to react to certain things. So yeah, I think that hits the nail on the head. Take care of your own body chemistry, whatever that is. And then when you were talking about substances, the word to me that comes to mind is, what's your relationship with X substance? That's the question. What's your relationship with alcohol? What's your relationship with antidepressant? What's your relationship? Because I think if you put it in that lens,
Mm.
like any other relationship, you're going to sit there and try to quantify, is this good? Is this bad? Is this working? Is this long term? Is it short term? Or is it just for kicks? Right. So to me, when it comes to a substance, and this was part of, a lot of work I've done in the past, is whether it's food or alcohol or whatever, um, what is your relationship with it? And if you can't define it, that's probably a key tool to sit there and define it and go, how am I using food? What is my relationship with alcohol? It's funny, and even in a business sense, there was one thing that I'd stopped doing that I think imposter syndrome was fueling, was entertaining. I was the person to take people out. If there were clients in town, Pittman, take them out, show them that really great time. Overworking, exhausted. I've been on all the Nashville rides a billion times, right? Downtown, yep, there's Tootsie's, yep, there's it. And then rolling back in at 2 in the morning, but it was enough to sit there and go, oh, well, that's the man, that's the guy. But realizing that was a really unhealthy relationship with two things. One was, obviously, you get earmarked as the guy to take the clients out, show them a good time, and all that other stuff. Literally had to stop doing that. That was an unhealthy relationship with a pursuit of validation. I thought it just came part and parcel with success. That was a normal thing, but it was also affecting what was my relationship with alcohol. It was way too much normalizing, of certain things. And I think, like anything else, I have not quit drinking, but I reestablished my relationship with alcohol once I put that lens on it. What is my relationship with alcohol? Is it social? Was it a business tool? I think at one point it was, um, and entertaining, and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, that's my response to substances: is define the relationship.
We've talked about movie references off and on, and my one of my favorite all time movies, Skin Deep. It's a Blake Edwards movie from 1980 something. John Ritter. It is an
What?
amazing movie. It is a great movie. Go check it out. It'll be hard to find because you can't. I don't think you can stream it. Maybe you can, but he's got this therapist that he goes to, And there's a scene where he goes in and he's getting close to rock bottom. He goes in and he talks to his therapist, and the therapist says, you know, when someone comes to me, when an alcoholic comes to me and says they need my help, the first thing I tell them to do is to stop drinking. And so there's this hilarious scene where John Ritter basically tells him to go F himself and like runs out, and it is funny. And I never understood that scene completely, because I thought the point of that scene was it was just, the therapist was oversimplifying something very complicated. But what I realized along the way was, and I think they don't hit it directly, but it sort of shows itself throughout the movie, that it's really that you can't fix that problem until you remove, especially if it is substance, that, to Kyle's point, there are things you have to remove before you can ever start the pathway to clarity. That brings us back to our topic, clarity. Really the clarity of imposter syndrome, but I think we've really talked about just clarity as a concept in whole. But I do think they go hand in glove. You can't get to the root of any issue when you're doing either all the wrong things, when you're stuck in your own subconscious, when you're using substances, and to Jeff's point, that relationship with substances, if you're dulling and numbing, and that's the form of self-medication, there's no clarification that'll be found there. But there are the scenarios where you can actually find some help in all of the tool sets, but one of them could be through some chemical things, whether it be a pill of gabapentin, or whether it could be the endorphins that get produced from when you're lifting. Those are all, they can help us. They can help us find that clarity, and that clarity is important. So I think, guys, I don't know about you guys. I feel like we've wandered a bit, but I feel like we had a great episode today. And we've got some coming up guests pretty soon that I'm really excited about. We'll be having, we've got Dr. Jill Stoddard scheduled. That she's a psychologist. She's got an incredible podcast herself. We'll be posting all of her information in the links. I'm going to get real selfish with a personal friend of mine, Janet Miller. We'll be talking a little bit more about her. And then we're going down under pretty soon with Dr. Terry Simpkins out of Tasmania. She's one of that continent's premier thinkers on the topic of imposter syndrome. So I'm excited about that. And guys, thanks for bringing it. Thanks for getting real today. Appreciate it. And yeah, that's a wrap.
Show them the blue ones.
That's the new quote. It's the blue ones.
There's the blue ones and the blue ones. Oh, yeah.
Well, that is a wrap on episode 6. I'm so proud that we've got this far in, and really, really happy about our output here. The line between imposter syndrome and generalized self-doubt, it's a spectrum. We could talk a lot about it, but it's messy, it's smudged, and there are so many of us that are standing right in it.
If you're waiting for doubt to disappear before you move on something, do not. That blurry line, it's just a leading indicator that you're in it, and that's right where you need to be.
Preach.
And when it feels like you're making it up as you go, good. That's where growth lives, just past the edge of uncertainty.
Edge of uncertainty. I live a large part of my life at the edge of certainty. But everyone that listened, everyone that joined us today, thank you for rolling with the Impodsters. We had a great episode. Hit that follow, share it with anyone that you think would benefit from it. If we've earned that right, please put it out there. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with a loved one. And remember, if you feel like a fraud, that's imposter syndrome. If you don't, then it's probably just generalized self-doubt. And until next time, thanks for joining the Impodsters.